Welcome back to this series on Adam Smith's theory of value. In the last episode, we discussed what a theory of value is, Smith's taxonomy for his theory of value, and began to pose the question, what is it that determines the value of a commodity? When first attempting to answer this question, Smith entertains the idea that the usefulness of a commodity might determine its value. He disposes with this idea pretty quickly, citing the fact that very useful commodities, like water, for example, often exchange for very little, whereas relatively useless commodities, like diamonds, often exchange for quite a lot. Alternatively, he proposes that the amount of labor embodied in the production of commodities might determine their value. This proposition is the thesis of Smith's labor-embodied theory of value, which we're going to discuss today. The core of the labor-embodied theory of value is this. To quote Smith, the proportion between the quantities of labor necessary for acquiring different objects seems to be the rule for exchanging them with one another. In particular, he proposes that the amount of labor embodied in the production of a commodity, tentatively measured in hours, say, is determinant of its value. Smith illustrates this argument by inviting us to imagine an early and rude state of society in which producers own their own means of production, there's mobility of producers between sectors, and all producers are equally skilled. In this early and rude state, suppose it costs each producer 2 hours of labor to hunt a beaver and 1 hour of labor to hunt a deer. When producers bring their product to market, it makes sense that, to quote Smith, one beaver should naturally exchange for or be worth 2 deer. In this theory of value, the mobility of producers between sectors ensures that the market prices of commodities tend to be proportional to the quantity of labor embodied in their production, even as the fluctuations in the demand for those commodities push market prices away from their center of gravity. Producers seeking higher incomes will migrate away from sectors where there's a low amount of income per unit of labor into sectors where rates of return are higher, driving supply up in profitable industries and removing supply from unprofitable ones. Increased supply in more profitable industries will drive down rates of return in that industry. Conversely, decreased supply in unprofitable industries will drive up their rates of return. The supply of labor will continue to move from unprofitable industries to profitable ones until returns per unit of labor in all industries are proportional to the quantity of labor expended in the production process. At this point, higher returns can't be found by migrating from one industry to another industry, so the incentives for producers to change their crafts ceases. To illustrate, let us return to Smith's early and rude state. The ability of hunters to switch between beaver hunting and deer hunting keeps the exchange ratio of beavers and deer proportional to the hours of labor it takes to hunt each animal, even as the demand for beavers and deer is constantly fluctuating. In the instance that an increased amount of townspeople are suddenly willing to pay for beavers when they can be acquired for 2 deer, Smith says, quote, a competition will immediately begin among them, and the market price will rise more or less above the natural price, according as either the greatness of the deficiency or the wealth and wanton luxury of the competition happen to animate more or less the eagerness of competition. Smith is saying that the increased demand can temporarily bring the exchange ratio of deer to beavers up to, say, 3-to-1, such that it takes 3 deer to exchange for 1 beaver. The incomes of beaver hunters will rise in consequence. Upon realizing this, deer hunters will flow into the beaver hunting sector in search of higher rates of return on their labor. The supply of deer hunters will decrease as they start to poach beavers instead, causing a respective increase in the supply of beaver hunters. The proliferation of beaver hunters and the constriction of deer hunters will continue until the increased supply of beavers and the decreased supply of deer drives down the rates of return on beaver hunting to a level equal to that of deer hunting. Incomes per unit of labor having been equalized, the relative prices of beaver to deer will return to 2-to-1. That is proportionate to the relative amounts of labor embodied in their production. In Smith's labor-embodied theory of value, it is by this mechanism that labor values exist to undergird relative prices. This force we've been discussing, the mobility of producers, is crucial in regulating the fluctuations of market prices around natural prices. And in the next video, we're going to discuss more about how market prices tend to gravitate around natural prices over time. If you're a graduate student or a professor studying economics, particularly history of economic thought, and you have some interesting work you'd be willing to share with me, I'd like to speak with you. Please reach out to me by filling out the form linked in the description of this episode. If you're studying economics at the undergraduate or high school level and you're in need of a tutor, I may be able to help you. You can get in contact with me by filling out that same form. If you'd like to see more content like this, where I discuss various topics in the history of economic thought, please consider checking out my YouTube channel. See you in the next episode.